Good afternoon, my lovely podcasters. Welcome to the Raw Reflections podcast brought to you by the Mirror Impact. My name is Ariel Keller, and today we are going to be talking about managing stress. Today, I want you to think about the stress that you have in your life. Maybe it is relationship stress, maybe it is work stress, social stress, maybe you have a lot of deadlines that you're having to meet, maybe you have some financial stress in your financial situation, maybe you have a lot of stress in your in the physical realm of certain things. Maybe you have a lot of digestive issues, or you just have a really hard time losing weight, and that's something that has become stressful for you. And some of those symptoms of stress, some of us don't realize we are stressed. And some of those symptoms of stress might be low energy or headaches. Sometimes with stomach and the GI tract definitely does react to higher stress situations. So maybe you've had some nausea or diet or diarrhea, constipation, aches and pains. Maybe you've just had a really hard time digesting certain foods. Maybe you've suddenly realized that you're sensitive to a common sensitivity food like dairy or gluten or soy. And maybe it's something you've tried to eliminate some of those foods, which is good because you're eliminating some stress on your body, which is definitely good. Some more symptoms of stress might include insomnia. You're not able to sleep. You're frequently focused on the situations or the issues that you are stressed about. It's become almost a crippling focus to where you can't focus on anything else. Stressing also decreases it causes our immune system to have to work a lot harder, and that makes us susceptible to getting sick a lot easier. So I definitely noticed that in my own body when I've had a really stressful day, my lymph nodes will swell up at the end of the day, and I'll start to get a sore throat or a headache, or my neck will just start aching and my body just tenses up. And I can tell when I'm in a high stress situation because of that. My body naturally it triggers that response in my body very quickly. And this is just one day of high stress. If it's something that's multiple days of high stress, I end up sick. And I know I have to listen to my body or I will end up sick. And part of managing stress is learning to listen to your body and what it needs at this specific time, working on self-care and maybe, taking a bubble bath every once in a while. That's not a bad thing, right? So what I want to do today is I want you to think about those areas of stress in your life and why they cause so much stress. Is it because you feel that you have a personal duty to accomplish this? Is it because you are trying to fulfill the expectations of someone else? Are you trying to achieve perfection, and that's what causes you stress? Is it something that you've placed a lot of expectations on yourself, and that is what causes you stress, and you're not able to accomplish what you've set out to do? So I just want you to think about, why is it that you allow yourself to get so high strung over the areas of your life that you feel the most stress? And I want you to identify that, maybe even write it down. If you have a pen and a paper close by, maybe write it down, write down the area of stress and then why you feel like it causes you so much stress. Is it serving you, or is it causing you more dysfunction in your life or your family or your schedule? And is it really worth it to you to go through that much stress in order to accomplish that? And maybe you're thinking, oh, well, the reason I get so stressed is because I'm trying to help my family. Well, that's wonderful. And I never want you to stop doing things for your family. That's wonderful. But sometimes when we shift the mindset of, oh, this is something I have to do versus, oh, this is something I get to do, it changes the chemical balance in our brain. And I'm going to explain that a little bit more. So one of the stress hormones that our brain releases when we're in stressful situations, not only does it use the amygdala that we talked about a couple of episodes back, where you have that fight or flight response and those stored up negative memories that maybe you're pulling from subconsciously. So that can sometimes tie into the reason you're so much more stressed than maybe the situation entails. Maybe you're at the grocery store and there's nothing that a lot of the things that you needed to get there are not there anymore, or they are out of certain things, and maybe that's super duper frustrating to you and you're so stressed out when you leave the store, but it's not because of the things that you needed not being on the shelf. It's because the rest of your day just piled up, and then that moment was just kind of your breaking point. We've all been there. We've all had those days when we're like, oh my God, this is not my day. I know you've said that before. I've definitely said it before. And that's something that we need to understand, that the way that we are viewing things, that does have to do with how stressed we are going to get. We can help to gauge that. It's not something that's uncontrollable or this wild storm that we can't do anything about. It is tameable. It is like a wild Mustang, not a hurricane, all right? So when we're in these stressful situations, we have to remember our body is designed very specifically to where when we are under a stressful situation, our bodies know what to do to repair it in most cases. It's just like when we get a cut on your finger, you're not just going to bleed out. Your body has its natural responses to come coagulate that blood and form a scab. And when that's not working properly, then that's when it becomes an issue. But our bodies have those natural instincts of healing when our bodies undergo stress. And a cut is a form of physical stress. It just doesn't, it's just slightly different than when we go through emotional stress and those kinds of things. The healing responses in those kinds of situations are going to be our oxytocin, the stress hormone that's from basically our pituitary gland, pumps that out when we are in stressful situations. And at the same time, the adrenaline and the cortisol is being pumped through from our adrenal glands, and which those ones are on top of your kidneys. So that's more of your body response. Well, this is in your brain, and it's just going to, it's basically helping to heal your situation, provide you with comfort. This is the comfort hormone. Oxytocin it's called the cuddle hormone. That's its nickname, because it's released when you give hugs and when you are, spending time with somebody that you care about. It's also can be released from purely psychological mechanisms. So it's not something we have to increase our stress in order to increase our oxytocin levels. Our oxytocin levels can be increased by simply doing certain things in order to feel the same feelings of giving or feel the same feelings of bonding. Oxytocin is also released when a mother is breastfeeding, or even when she's in labor. It's something that's released in the body to provide that bonding mentality. And that's why that's why women who've gone through labor are like, oh, it's a bonding experience. It's something that, yes, it's painful, but it's not like your body's undergoing a lot of stress. But the oxytocin is also being released in your brain at super high levels that leads to that feeling of closeness and bonding with the baby. And oxytocin isn't only released during reproduction or used for reproduction. That is a high reason for it. But when it comes to other benefiting things that oxytocin can help, is the relationship enhancing benefits of trust and gazing into each other's eyes, empathy for the other person's perspective, maybe positive relationship memories, looking at a picture of a trip that you went on, fidelity. It increases fidelity because obviously, if you are happy and you are content and fulfilled in a relationship, you don't necessarily need to look outside of it. Positive communication, that's also a huge part of it, is making sure that your love languages tie into this as well. That's why studying the 5 love languages is sometimes beneficial for couples, because they feel those increases of oxytocin, and by just talking about love and how they can love each other more, it is increasing their oxytocin levels. Same thing with couples counseling, and at least sometimes, I wouldn't say all the time, but when you're talking about how to start solving problems or working on the issues that you've been having, then that increases those oxytocin levels, and obviously increases the empathy, because oxytocin helps to increase empathy. So that that's why talking about it and verbalizing it, even talking and verbalizing stress or what you are stressed about, increases those oxytocin levels. And that's the reason why counseling and life coaching, and even going, my husband's barber calls it, he says therapist, because he gets to go in and it's a therapy session. He does his hair while it's a therapy session, and they talk about all kinds of stuff. And I think it's a really important friendship to have. I love having a person do my hair and getting to see them once a month and catch up, and having a person that I really connect with. I just found that in Georgia. Shout out to Morgan. But so it's really cool to have those relationships that you can verbally connect with someone and increase those oxytocin levels for yourself. And it also just feels good to get it out there and verbalize it, because then it becomes a lot more material rather than something that's out in the abyss, something that we can't necessarily get hold of or get control of. And that's how life feels a lot of times, and that's why that causes stress, because we don't feel that we're in control. And many of us don't like to have that feeling. And by verbalizing it, it creates that that materialistic, grabbable concept that we can wrap our heads around a little bit more, maybe even write it down, and it makes it even look even smaller. And then be like, all right, well, how am I going to address this? Why am I stressed at this? What is it that I'm stressed at? Why am I stressed at about this? And then what's the first step that I take in order to, first off, address it to where it's going to benefit me physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And if that's causing me harm, then is it something that's worth stressing about? And I think that's a really big question to ask ourselves when we are stressed. And I have to do that constantly, because I get stressed very, very easily, and a lot less so this year than in past years. I've learned to deal with it a lot more, but it does affect my dopamine and serotonin levels, and those are often referred to as our happy hormones, and that's why stress can be so closely correlated to depression and anxiety as well, which we're going to talk about in the next couple of episodes, and just kind of look at it in a little bit more detail. But when we are when we have the human connection with someone, that is increasing those and oxytocin levels, and that also helps to increase those dopamine levels as well, because if we are happy about seeing a person, our brain releases dopamine. If we are active, our brain also releases dopamine. That's why exercise helps with stress and depression and anxiety. Those serotonin levels also increase, and that oxytocin is produced with that. And so that's just kind of our surge of positive emotions right there. That's the happy feelings, because we're not always going to feel happy, right? We're going to have times when we feel down and bummed out. We're going to have those days that are kind of mediocre, and they're not really good, but they're not bad. There's nothing to complain about, but there's nothing that you can really find that stood out. And those days are okay, but it is also important to take the efforts to be able to increase. Now we know we have the power to increase our dopamine and serotonin and oxy. I almost said Oxycontin. That's not the right one. That's not it at all. Oxytocin levels. Wow. Is my mother listening? The oxytocin levels, we can help to increase those, and those also help to reduce that heart rate and reduce the blood pressure and increase that positive social interaction. Just those little things that are happening throughout our day, or the interactions that we have with people. We'll be a lot more tolerable of people, that's for sure. So now that we know a little bit more about the chemicals our bodies produce when we're in stressful situations, I want to talk a little bit more about how our perception of what stress is and the negative things that it could possibly do to our body, or how it could negatively influence our health, our perception of that can change the way that it affects our bodies in either a positive or negative way. So among quite a few articles I found on the internet, I came across one by Hay Sigmund talking about the Harvard research article I had heard about this concept from a YouTube video. And this Harvard research study was done to reframe stress as helpful rather than helpful, and how that mindset can improve performance and reverse the psychological and physiological effects that are brought on by stress. So basically by shifting our perception of stress and what it does to us, can shift from a negative force to a positive one, and can add decades to our life potentially. So using the National Health Interview Survey as the data from that, a massive study was done on almost 30,000 participants, exploring the relationship between the experience of stress and the perception of how stress affects health and mortality. Those are the three things. And in this article, basically the results from what they'd pulled together were, one, that the risk of premature death was increased if people who were experiencing stress believed that stress would adversely impact their health. They were starting to experience certain negative health concerns. And those who reported experiencing high stress and who also believed that stress adversely affected health had a 43% increase in the risk of premature death. And then 3, those who experienced high stress but didn't believe it to be harmful were at lower risk for dying, even lower than people who didn't experience a lot of stress. So the first one was people who didn't really experience a whole lot of stress, but they did believe that it could increase their stress. And their risk for premature death was even larger than the people who experienced stress but didn't believe it was harmful to them. So I believe I said this earlier, but oxytocin is a hormone that can be released by purely psychological effects. Your body does not have to be under stress to increase oxytocin levels. So therefore, just by our perception of, stress isn't necessarily going to affect me, everything's going to be okay, things are going to work out, our body can naturally learn to increase those oxytocin levels without needing the high stress in order to give us those oxytocin levels. And also, follow my reasoning here, if this isn't super duper accurate, maybe this was just a coincidence, these studies that were done that, found that people who think that stress has less effect on them are less affected. But it honestly makes sense because our mind and our body are connected. So when we change our mentality about a situation, we ultimately can take that power back and control our reactions rather than trying to control the situation. And it's very similar with reframing our focus on stress and how it affects our minds and our bodies. Because if we look at it as something that is oh, this is terrible for my body. If I'm stressed, we get stressed about being stressed. And then it becomes this downward cycle, just like we go through with our emotional, you know, our emotional roller coasters of what we're feeling versus what's actually going on. We can also do the same thing when it comes to our physical state and stress, because we think that we are in such a terrible state, or that we're going to be in a terrible state if we don't get the stress taken care of or managed. But maybe, and just maybe, this stress is meant to be managed by first reframing our thought process about stress. We just learned about all of these positive things that stress can do for our bodies. And yes, stress that has gone unmanaged can cause a lot of health problems. It can cause, anywhere from digestive issues to heart failure. If you really think about it, stress is simply something that is, your body isn't designed to endure for long periods of time. But just like exercise, if you think about it, exercise is stress. It's physical stress on your muscles and your body so that you gain strength. And without going through that exercise, you're not going to gain the strength. If we don't go through those difficult moments in our emotional maturity, or that journey of emotional maturity, then we're never going to gain the insight that we can use in future situations. And stress is the same thing. And if we, instead of looking at it as something that is negative and that we want to completely remove from our lives, like it's junk food or like it's processed food, stress, we were designed to have stress as a way to survive. We were designed to have stress as something that will help us in our situations of dire need, or when we have to react to something, or when our hand is on something hot and we need to move it. Our brain sends signals to our body, or our body sends signals to our brain, and it all works together. And there's a reason for each piece of that puzzle. And the part of the stress process that I love is the oxytocin levels that are increased because of stress. And oxytocin also is increased by that positive social interaction. So when we put ourselves in situations where we can talk to other people and we can connect with other people, stress is basically causing us to form human connections. It's one way of increasing those oxytocin levels, and it gets people out of their comfort zones to talk to other people, to connect with other people, because as human beings, we're social beings. We need to have that social connection, and stress allows us to need that even more. If we didn't deal with stress, we wouldn't have to connect with other people. If we didn't have stress, we wouldn't be getting those doses of oxytocin nearly as regularly as we could be if we were slightly stressed every once in a while. Maybe that little bit of stress is helping to train our body to see it differently. And when we have that perception and we have that perspective on it, it changes. It's kind of just like the first episode that I did when I was talking about our relationship with like self-love and our relationship to food, and like, when we are doing something for our body because we love it rather than because we're punishing it. Why would we go in to our day with the perspective that the stress that we know we're going to have is going to cause damage to our bodies? But instead, why don't we go into our day understanding, yes, we're going to have stress, but we're going to have stress, and then when that stress hits our bodies, our beautifully crafted natural response is going to be that release of oxytocin and that hormone of human connection, that hormone that is going to make us feel connected with whoever that we're talking to because we're stressed and we need to talk to someone. Or maybe it's your spouse, or maybe it's your significant other or your partner or whatever that might be, or friend. Maybe it's going to allow you to connect with this person in a way that you wouldn't have been able to if you weren't stressed. So my challenge to you is not managing stress in your typical ways of, exercising. Absolutely. If you want to manage your stress that way, please do it. Exercising and being active, just going out, getting yourself out there, doing different things, those all increase oxytocin levels. And that's why it helps to decrease stress. And I want you to think about it in that perspective as, yes, as I'm enduring this stress, instead of just enduring it, I'm going to thrive because of it. It's forcing me to experience higher levels of oxytocin in my body. And what are you going to do with that? Oxytocin is also released when you go serve somebody else or you go help somebody else. Maybe you give a homeless man $10 or, a snack if you don't have $10. Maybe you do something that is going to benefit someone else. Maybe you open the door for someone, or you help somebody with their groceries, or whatever it might be. Do something to empathize with someone else, and that's automatically going to increase those oxytocin levels. So maybe instead of starting to look for ways to avoid stress, we start looking for ways to grow through stress and to maybe help somebody else out in the process. So that's my challenge for you. That's my charge for you this week. I'm going to try to embody the same thing because this is all new information for me as well. This is why I found it so fascinating, and I wanted to share it. It was because I'd never viewed stress like this before, and it has totally changed the way that I see it. And I'm excited to start embodying that belief in the way that I react to stress and respond to stress. So I encourage you with that this week. I also want to say that I am looking for requests. I want your opinions. Those who are listening regularly, those are the people that I'm speaking to. And if you have something that you want me to talk about on the podcast, or maybe you have a situation or a question, you could definitely put in your email or your message. You can email me, DM me, or email me at themirrorimpact@gmail.com, spelled exactly the way that it sounds. And you can also message me on the Connect page at the website, themirrorimpact.com, or you can find me on Facebook, The Mirror Impact, or Instagram, mirror.impact. And go follow me there, like, share, subscribe if you want to hear more about anxiety and depression and going a little bit deeper into that. So stay tuned. Again, I have absolutely loved talking with you guys today. My name is Ariel Keller, and this has been the Raw Reflections podcast. Talk to you next time. Bye-bye.